My mother hated him and wouldn't go anywhere near him. And I did that classic thing of, because I knew better. In fact, she knew better. She was right. It's just so hard to know, because yes, there were signs, I think now, but I wasn't equipped to either see them or to know what to do about them. I had grown up in a household where my father had occasional outbursts towards my mother, but I was quite unprepared for what actually happened to me. So I met the person who was to become my husband and the father of my child when I was 15, and I had a relationship with him from I was 15 until I was 18. When I was 18, I married him. 2 weeks later, my brother died, and 2 weeks later, my then husband beat the living daylights out of me, and I was so black and blue that I actually had to stay in bed and stay away from work and hide from my family. My analysis of that is that he felt he controlled me and owned me once we were married. He didn't do it before we were married. This happened in 1975, so it's a long time ago, but nevertheless it was about the ownership of me. And I'm probably a fairly weak man, because my attention was not on him. My attention was on my family and the death of my brother. But this started a pattern of very, very serious beatings. And after he did it, he was sorry every time. And I didn't believe him after a while, because it was so deliberate. It was so calculated. He didn't have to be drunk to do the things he did. It helped him to not take responsibility, but he certainly wasn't drunk all the time. And some of the most severe beatings occurred when he was stone cold sober. He worked in the shipyard in Belfast, and so he wore to work steel toe cap boots, and he would frequently kick me with those boots. Alongside this, there were issues of not having any money. Any money I had was taken. Any money he had, he kept. And so just struggling all the time. Trying to maintain my job as then a teenager really was quite challenging, and whilst I worked in the civil service and they were supportive, it was still at a time when I had to lie and disguise everything. So I felt like a complete liar to everyone in the world around me. I would turn up at work with bruises, and I really literally did say things like I walked into a door, and I felt such an idiot. I felt so stupid, and I felt so lost as to what to do. I can remember very much I was very much a feminist in my teens, and I remain so. But this was the early 70s, the mid 70s. It was very exciting. The changes around women, it was just really exciting times, and I wanted to be part of that. So I wanted a career. I didn't really want to get married, but I did because it was still the social norm. I really didn't want to have children. My husband really wanted me to have a child. Again, my analysis of that is it was all about him and his masculinity and his control of me. So he beat me, and beat me, and beat me, and I eventually agreed to have a child. And then when I was pregnant, he beat me, and he beat me, and he beat me, and told me he'd help me get rid of it. The week before Laura was born, he beat the living daylights out of me, bounced me against the wall. And his father was present when that happened. And I thought, this baby's going to die. I'm going to die. This baby's going to die. I have to do something. And I pretended that the baby was coming. And he drove me down to the hospital drunk. And I decided that that was a lesser risk. The risk of an accident because he was drunk was lesser than what was happening in my house. And they examined me and they said, there's no sign of the baby coming. And I'm going, well, I can feel this, and I'm just like lying, and I'm crying and crying and crying, and nobody twigs. Nobody asks me anything about, is there something else going on? Nobody asks. And they must have known. These are nurses, they must have known. They must have, and they let him come in and sit with me. So after they'd done all of their examinations, he's still there. And by this time he's so drunk and it's starting to affect him that he's falling asleep sitting on the chair. So I'm not in danger, but I'm petrified. And I can't believe that they've done this, and I have never ever forgotten, and it's been one of the things I have been such a strong advocate for, is that women will lie about all sorts of things, and people need to know, people need to understand that these are signs. If you have this little girl weeping and terrified and obviously telling lies, they knew the baby wasn't coming. I knew the baby wasn't coming, but I was lying because I was staying in that hospital because I wasn't safe at home, and my baby wasn't safe. But she survived, and is a happy 39-year-old. But it nearly killed me, and it nearly killed her. And I remember writing to a women's magazine called The Women's Own, asking, what can I do? There is nowhere to go. There is nothing I can do. What can I do? I'd called the police a couple of times and they just left. You know, it's like, oh mate, you know, don't do this. Be nice. And so I'd get beaten for calling the police. I didn't want to involve my family because all my brothers and sisters are younger than me, and my mother was 4'11", so she was not, and he would have hurt her. He would have hurt them. So I really didn't know what to do. But when Laura was 1, I wrote to, and they told me about this new thing called Women's Refuges, and so I packed up one day and got on a plane to London and went to a refuge in London, and it was shocking. It was nothing that I'd ever, moving to Wandsworth in London was, I come from the country in Northern Ireland. It was just frightening and shocking, and I didn't know anybody, and I was completely out of my depth. And so I went back to the refuge in Belfast. I felt comfortable, but and I went back to work because for me work has always been important. So I went back to work, and Laura was only 1, and she got gastroenteritis, and she was in hospital and in isolation, and they wouldn't discharge her to the refuge, and I had nowhere to go, and so I went back. And everything was fine for a few weeks, and I got pregnant again, and then the beatings started again, and this time the baby didn't survive. I lost that baby, and when I lost that baby I said I have to go, and instead this time of just packing up and running, I was actually quite disciplined and cold about it. I saved my money very carefully. I planned what I would take. I planned how I would go, and I knew that I would go back to London because I needed to be unfindable, because my ex-husband in Northern Ireland, there were organisations that operated that were like, they didn't see themselves as criminal gangs, but they were very powerful and they could find anybody. So I had to be out of Northern Ireland, and I knew I had to go to London, so I planned it. I had gone to London, I think, on the Sunday, And on the Tuesday morning he turned up at the door of the refuge in Portrush. So I was very, very lucky that I got out quick enough, and I did it. And my mother helped me, even though she put herself at great risk. And I was safe, but I lost everything. For a number of years I lost my family. I lost everything I'd ever expected my life to be. And I had to remake everything, including myself. And I did. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.